to Creativity Cooks. Today we are making rock candy. To make this recipe, you will need the following ingredients: 3 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water, 4 lollipop sticks, half a teaspoon of red food coloring, half a teaspoon of blue food coloring, half a teaspoon of blueberry extract, and about 4 clothespins. Once you have all necessary ingredients, let's begin. Add half a cup of water to a drinking glass or a jar. Dip each of your lollipop sticks in the water. I'm just going to swirl mine around just a little bit just to get a little bit more moisture in these lollipop sticks. But once you have them nice and wet, you can go ahead and remove them from the water. In a separate plate, add about a quarter cup of sugar to that plate. As you remove your lollipop sticks from the water, roll them in the sugar on the plate so that each lollipop sticks will get a little bit of sugar just attaching to them. For your rock candy, this is going to be the beginning of the sugar crystals, and you're doing this step so that as your rock candy begins to form around those lollipop sticks, it will attach itself to these sugar crystals here that are starting the process out for your candy. The sugar is also going to get a little bit wet, not a problem, it's just water. We are going to be boiling this later, so you don't have to worry about that. You can leave your lollipop sticks on the plate, or you can start just attaching them to your clothespins with your small jar. Be really careful when you're attaching them. You don't want that lollipop stick to be too close to the side of your jar, or you don't want it to be touching the bottom of your jar either. So just carefully attach it on, and you can go ahead and do the same thing to each of the 4 lollipop sticks on a different jar. So now we're going to make the solution for your rock candy. So we are going to add 1 cup of water to a medium pot. Once the water has been added to the pot, you can now place the pot on the stove and turn the stove on to medium heat. As that stove is turned on, we can now go ahead and add 1 cup of sugar to your water. Once the sugar is added, I am just going to use my mixing spoon, and I'm going to go ahead and mix this sugar up in the water. I want the heat of the water to start dissolving this sugar, and that's also why I'm only adding 1 cup at a time as opposed to adding all of my sugar. This sugar dissolving process does take a little bit of time. I am not going to fast forward this video. I'm going to keep it playing in real time so that you guys can see that it's not that quick of a process. There's a couple of things that's happening to my pot right now. The water is getting hotter. There's bubbles starting to form at the bottom of my pot because the heat from the pot is just raising the temperature of the water. And as this is happening, you want to just gently still stir this pot. The sugar, we don't want it to get so hot that it just gets really hard on the bottom of your pot. We want it to get dissolved into the water. This is the solution for candy, and that just means that it just has to be very, very concentrated. As you continue to add more sugar to this, you'll notice how the water starts to become more viscous. It starts to become a little bit harder to stir. But as you're stirring it now, it still feels like just plain water. There's not that much sugar that's been added to it. But again, this is not something that you want to just leave on the stove and let it just do what it's going to do on its own. You want to be watching this. You want to be standing here the whole time. You want to be with your mixing spoon in your hands the whole time so that if anything starts to happen, if this pot gets too hot, if it starts to boil over, then you are there and you can react as needed. So this sugar solution, the bottom of my pot, there's still little bits of sugar crystals on there, but most of the sugar has been dissolved already. The water is not as white as it was when I first added the sugar. So as this sugar solution is dissolving, I'm going to go ahead and add another cup of sugar to this water. You want to use your mixing spoon and you want to break this sugar up. You do not want the sugar to just be hardened into clumps into the water solution. You don't have to stir it the entire time, but you want to watch it. You want to see what the pot is doing. You can see the bubbles coming up from the bottom of my pot, meaning that this pot, even though it's on medium heat, it's getting hotter and hotter, and we don't want to have this boiling over as we're doing it because that will be very hard to clean up. There's a lot of sugar on here. If it gets on the counters, it will start hardening to your countertops as it cools down. So you want to be mindful of this pot. And as it is dissolving right now, I have lots of sugar that is just kind of getting stuck on the bottom of my pot, and I'm just going to let it boil up because I like watching these bubbles. They're actually quite fun. It almost looks like fish in the ocean as they're just popping up. It's really cool. But no, this water is boiling. It's getting hotter. Even though the sugar is still dissolving here, we want to definitely get back in there, get our mixing spoons and mix it up and help the sugar dissolve as much as possible. You can see just after stirring it now, the boiling water just did release some of the sugar from the bottom, but the hotter the water is getting, it's actually making it a little bit easier to dissolve, but you can still feel now how the water, it's still in a very liquid state, but you can tell that it's starting to get a little bit more viscous, and it's because it's dissolving so much of the sugar that's in here. And once this sugar starts to dissolve, the water is not going to be 100% as clear as it was from my last cup of sugar. But as this sugar begins to dissolve, go ahead and add the remainder of your sugar. It should be a cup and probably a little bit more from your plate. You want to go ahead and add it to this water now and use your mixing spoon to mix this solution up. I just looked over and I have a little bit of sugar left on the plate that I was using to roll my lollipop sticks. So if you did the same thing and you still have some of that sugar remaining, go ahead and add the rest of it to your sugar solution. We need as much sugar in this as possible, but not too much. I find that if you ever make this recipe and it doesn't work and your rock candies fail to form, it's generally because we just didn't add enough sugar to this solution. But for this recipe, we're using 3 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water. That's a really heavy solution, and this should be enough to help your rock candies form in about 3 to 5 days. Again, I'm not going to fast forward this clip. I'm going to play it for you just in real time so you can see how long this process takes. It doesn't really take that long. This recipe altogether takes about 20 minutes, but I don't want to fast forward it because as you guys are going ahead, I don't want you to forget that we need to continually stir this pot and stir this sugar solution so that all of our sugar gets dissolved into the water. And now that most of our sugar have been dissolved, we are going to go ahead and add about half a teaspoon of strawberry extract to this sugar solution. Because this eventually is going to form candy, we just use the strawberry extract to give your candy a little bit of a strawberry flavor. If you're doing this at home and you have another extract like vanilla or cinnamon or even mint, and eucalyptus, any type of extract will work for this depending on the flavor that you want to give your candy. And now that my solution is pretty much good to go, all of my sugar have been dissolved, please, I'm asking you, ask a parent or a guardian for help with this step. But we are going to remove our pot from the stove, and we are going to now get a second pot. We're going to call this pot now pot A, and we're going to get a second pot that we're going to name pot B. What we'll need to do is remove about half of the solution of your sugar mixture from pot A and put it into pot B. The reason why we are doing this is because we want to make our candy two different colors. If you are going to make a solid candy like, just a red or just a blue, you could add your food coloring to this individual pot, but we just want you guys to separate it because we want to have a red and a blue candy. And to create the coloring for the candy, we're going to add just a few drops, which is about half a teaspoon of red food coloring. We're going to go ahead and add that to pot A. And we're also going to do the same with pot B. We're going to add about half a teaspoon of blue food coloring to pot B. Once you have added the food coloring, please just use a nice mixing spoon or stirring stick to go ahead and stir this solution up. Many of you, if you're using pots, this is food coloring. It's very safe to use. Hopefully it doesn't stain your pot when you're doing this. So once you have made this recipe, right after this, immediately go ahead and wash those pots. If you added your lollipop sticks to your glass jars from step 5, let's take this step to go ahead and remove those lollipop sticks from your glass jars. Once the lollipop sticks have been removed, we are now going to add that sugar solution with the food coloring to our glass jars. I'm going to start with my red food coloring. So I'm just using a wet measuring cup right now, and I'm scooping it out of my pot A into one of my glass jars. You want to try to have, this glass that I'm using is about 4 ounces or so. You can really eye this. You can look at it from when you did step 5 and see how you put your lollipop sticks in. This will help you see how much of this solution that you can use for the individual glass jars. I'm just going to go ahead and pour the rest of it into these jars. I have each jar about almost 3/4 cups full. It really depends on you at home and what you are using for this recipe. It is sugar, so if you do use a drinking glass, it does wash away. You'll have to soak it for a little bit afterwards in the sink with some warm water, and it will make that sugar dissolve. So once I've added my red food coloring to 2 of my glass jars, I am now going to go ahead and add my blue food coloring to my other remaining glass jars. I just spilled a little bit of my blue food coloring in my red, and I was going to change it, and I was like, that might make a fun purple rock candy when this is formed. So just as a reminder, when you're cooking or baking or making anything, even if it's like science foods, if you make mistakes, sometimes those mistakes turn out to be really beautiful, happy endings. So do not worry about that. I will say this, however, you can also see how my countertop is just getting so messy from this rock candy sugar solution. Please help your moms and dads out by cleaning this up after. You can use some cleaning solution and a paper towel, but definitely clean up after yourselves while you are pouring your sugar candy solution into your jars. And if you have not done so already, please do so now. Those lollipop sticks that have the sugar on them, let's go ahead and put those back into your glass jars. You want to be really careful, like I said before, that you do not have your lollipop stick touching the bottom of your glass or the side of your glass. What's going to happen as this candy begins to form is it gets hard, it gets hardened, and you won't be able to remove it very easily because it will get stuck to the bottom or the side of your glass. So do what you can to please keep that clothespin on top of your glass jar so that it can hold your popsicle stick, but be very mindful that you are not touching the bottom or the sides with the popsicle sticks because it gets really hard on there. And just go ahead and insert all 4 of your popsicle sticks into the sugar solution. And this is basically what's going to happen now for our rock candy. It's going to take us about 3 to 5 days for the bottom of that lollipop stick. It's going to just get hardened with candy that will be edible. You can eat it. This is very important, though, for all the kids in our Mad Science cooking class this week. You can go ahead and eat your rock candy, the red one, but you will need the blue rock candy for next week's recipe. I almost spilled the beans and said what it was, but I'm not going to tell you guys. So thank you so much for cooking with us. Remember, please save your blue rock candy for your recipe for next week. Thank you for cooking with us, and we will see you guys next week.